All right. So this is now the second part of the interview with David and Mike Logan. And where we're picking this up again is talking about the day that Major Samuel Porter Logan Jr. was shot down in his B-29. And so, David, if you can tell us what happened on that day, September 9th, 1950, in North Korea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were on a bombing run to knock out bridges and roads and train depots that were allowing supplies to be shipped by the North Koreans to the south. And it was about 11:30 in the morning on the 9th of September when they were finishing up their bombing run with one more pass, and they were flying low. And they were hit by, the flak was very heavy. All the other pilots that gave affidavits afterwards said that they had very heavy flak that day. And so my dad's plane, little Mike, took a hit in the number 2 engine. It started leaking fuel and was on fire. And Captain Hoyt ordered my dad to have all the crew prepare to bail out. And he was going to head west to the ocean to try to make it to the ocean to ditch out there and maybe get rescued with a sea rescue. And as they turned, the other pilots said that the plane kind of exploded in midair and broke apart. And they saw parachutes coming out of the plane, and they were able to see clearly 5 parachutes. And several people said they saw a 6th parachute that was on fire and went down, but they other planes flew around basically very under heavy flak just to make sure that the count of the parachutes and to make sure they all hit the ground. They said 4 of the parachutes landed very close to the wreckage site, and one drifted about 500 yards over a hill, and they didn't know who was who. But the plane actually came down in 2 sections, about 200 yards apart. And so it definitely did explode and was kind of blown apart. And so that was, they saw heavy traffic vehicles and stuff heading to that site. And so they were pretty sure that the other pilots that were observing this, that they were going to be captured. They had a kind of a rescue packet that they would drop to down pilots that had extra ammunition. It had radios in it, had first aid supplies and all, food, rations, and water. But they didn't. They said none of the planes had one on board, so they were unable to drop that. But they didn't think it would do much good anyway because they were already probably captured because there was a lot of activity going to them very quickly.
Sure.
So that was the day that they were shot down, and that's kind of what it looked like.
Right. Now from here, I'm going to go towards what was happening with your mom. So how soon after he was shot down did she get notified that your dad was missing? Do you know when she got the telegram or knock on the door, or how did she get notified?
You know, that's never been discussed. I just know that she knew that he had been shot down and that he was either dead or captured. Mm-hmm. He was actually missing in action, is what they clarified him.
Right. So, I know a lot of the. Please go ahead.
She very quickly packed up from Spokane and moved back to Nashville with Mike and I. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, they were not expecting a quick return or a quick answer. But I do not know how many days or weeks that, you know, it was before she was notified. Mike and I certainly weren't part of that conversation until much later. So.
Right. So you never, I mean, you were how old when your father went missing? You were 3 or 4?
I was 4 years and 8 months. So
you don't remember anything?
A letter from my dad. The letter my dad wrote right before he, in August, right before he was shot down, said that he can't believe that Mike's almost 2 and that I'll soon be 5. That was one of the sentences in the letter.
I see. So you don't remember as a child any memory of anything traumatic with the news of your father going missing? Nothing that you recall in your own memory?
Well, I remember when my mom had to tell us that he had been shot down, and that we needed to pray for his return.
Mm,
That they didn't know what really happened to him,
mhm,
and so she assumed that he was one of the parachutes that made it, but she didn't have any clear information
mhm.
at that time.
So as a young 4-year-old, almost becoming 5, how did you process that information when she told you that he was shot down? What did you understand what that meant, or that he may not be coming home?
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know. I don't think we ever gave up hope
Mhm.
uh, for a long time. I knew that was one of the. It's still kind of painful.
Yes, I
That
know.
was one of the things we did every night before we went to bed was pray for him.
Mm,
So we
mhm.
never quit doing that.
Yes, and we're still praying for him to return.
Right.
So, well, I know that how painful this is for all the families, and time does not heal that pain because the loss is still there. And I have heard and met so many families with the same pain they still carry. So then, after this news was received, what did your mom find out? Did she ever find out more, or what was her? Did she take on a search to find out more? I know
Oh,
that they considered him
she,
killed
she
after a certain time.
my grandmother and my mom wrote letters to every person of influence in the world. I mean, they were writing to uh, it's Stalin, Khrushchev, Eisenhower. I mean, she had letters that she had written to everybody about
Wow.
trying to find out what happened to her son or her husband. And they were very diligent about it. My grandmother probably more diligent than my mother, because my mother was busy trying to raise 2 boys by herself.
Right, right.
But my grandmother never gave up hope, never quit writing. And she, I mean, until the day she died, she was 98 years old. She just knew he was in a Russian prison or working in the salt mines or something in Russia somewhere, in the Gulag or something. But she
So,
never thought he was killed at that time. She
right.
always
So
saw him as a prisoner that needed to be prayed for and released. And
wow.
she was pressing anybody and everybody that she could that had influence to find out what happened to him. And
Now,
so,
was your dad her only son?
yes, uh-huh,
Was her only son?
Her
right,
only child.
only child, yeah,
Only child and only son.
yeah,
Wow. So that was a huge loss to her.
definitely, yeah,
Huge loss to her.
yeah. She never got over it. I mean, she learned to live with it like we all do. But I don't think, I mean, I know that she or my mom, neither one ever really got over it. It was,
Wow. But your grandmother sounds like an incredible lady to have written to everybody under the sun
she
about her
did.
son that's missing. And she was right. He survived the crash. But at that time, none of you knew that he survived the crash, right? I mean, but she had that feeling that he had survived the crash.
Yeah.
Wow. What an incredible woman she was. So then when she died, what was the extent of what she found out? Did she know anything when she passed on?
She knew that he was definitely, I mean, over the years, he was declared legally dead in 1954, May of 1954.
Mhm.
And they'd said, missing with a presumption of dead.
Right.
And so uh, that's when she received his insurance benefits from the Army, from the Air Force, and started drawing his pension and child support from that. And so that's kind of for her was kind of a final thing, that they were really weren't going to find out what happened.
Mhm.
At that time they did know that the Russians had released a news article with my dad's picture in it and said his name was Samuel Login, Lodgin. They misspelled his name, but it was definitely my dad.
Yes.
And it been captured by after a B-29 that they had shot down. Well, they didn't shoot it down unless they were on the ground when the North Koreans were shooting. But anyway, they're the ones that published that article, and that's when it started coming out that my dad was probably lived beyond the September 29th that he had scratched on that jail wall. So
right.
he was in that jail.
Let's talk about that. So
Susan, let me insert something there.
Sure.
So important. The article came out in Russia, and the Washington Post picked up the article, and that's when they knew. But it was because of the Washington Post that saw the article that was put in a Russian newspaper about the capture of this B-29 pilot. But the government was still oblivious to it. It's through the media that we found out.
Right. So when did the Washington Post carry that story from the Russian newspaper called Pravda? Pravda newspaper is when it appeared in Russia in 1950. When did Washington Post pick it up? Was it soon after that or years after that?
I don't know.
It was in 1951. It was in 51,
Okay, 51.
about a year later.
So that means your mother and your grandmother both knew that your father was in the possession of Russians.
Right.
Yeah.
And Pravda stands for truth. The newspaper Pravda, the Russian newspaper Pravda means truth.
Well, that's rare, isn't it, for a Russian communist regime?
That's right.
That's kind of ironic. They tend not to be truthful, but at least on that, with your father being captured, they were truthful about them having captured him, and he was in their possession. So your mom and your father's mother both knew that he was taken by the Russians. And
you probably know this, and we've talked about it before, but they were considered American trophies. Prisoners of war like my dad were trophies. And so, and there were others like him that were considered trophies, that were pilots and so forth. And but that's why Russia was putting it out in their paper. Look what we've got, another trophy.
Right. And I do know a lot of other U.S. Air Force families of missing, and they have similar stories where their loved one was a fighter pilot or a bomber pilot, and they were taken by the Russians. And years later, they found documents and other supporting information from the Russian archives. So I know your father's case is similar in that way. And this is something that I think most of the public does not know, that the Russians were very interested in our US Air Force airmen who were specifically pilots, because they had special intelligence about aircrafts and air bases and things like that. And so they were a valued asset, I guess, to them. To learn about, what we had capabilities of. Well,
you got to remember that the B-29 is the one that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and so it was a very feared weapon in the sky, and so they wanted to know as much as they could about it, because the Russians did not have a long-range bomber like that. They did not have helicopters, and we had a lot of helicopters in our service, so they wanted to know more about helicopters. And our Sabre jet, the fighter, was not nearly as fast as the MiG, Russian MiG, but it was much more maneuverable. And so in a dogfight, the Sabre jet was wearing the MiGs out, not by speed, just by maneuverability. And so they really wanted to get a lot of information from the fighter pilots. So the Russian, the guy that was doing the documentary on the Sabre jet pilots who'd been shot down, it was called Missing in MiG Alley, was the name of the report he was doing. And that's where he stumbled across that footage of my dad, taken with the officer, the Korean officer. So
well, let's go ahead and show that. So the next thing we're going to show everyone here is an incredible video footage showing your father standing next to his wreckage with a North Korean soldier guarding him. Obviously, he was captured at that point. And I'm going to ask you before we show this video, when was this video discovered? That there was a video footage?
2010.
2010. And who discovered it, and how was it released? Do you know?
Well, that journalist who did that research, he's a British journalist, discovered it, and when he saw that footage and everything, he released that to Department of Defense and gave it to them, and then they identified it clearly as my dad and everything, and that's when they sent us a letter saying that we may have some photo evidence regarding your father, and then they followed it up with a complete report, which you've seen, that has all the map where the plane was shot down. It's got it had still pictures of all the things, but then we later, after that, received a video copy of the video that was actually of the movie. It was 16 millimeter film, but it's only like less than a minute, really,
right?
Footage of him. But we got that very shortly after that. But we didn't. It was like how many? 50 years after. No, 60 years after he was shot down that we got that. So
right.
it kind of laid fallow for a while
Right.
before it was discovered.
Wow, it's incredible to see it. It gives me such mixed emotions when I watch that. I wonder what he was feeling at that time, but so grateful that we have evidence that at least he was alive, that he survived the crash. At least we know that much. So let me see if I can share that video now. Let's see here. Okay, let's see if we can show this. I don't know if we have sound on here or not, but it shows in this clip a picture of your father standing there. And this is the newspaper article that featured that he was shot down, and he was the Captain Logan Soviet photo. I don't think we're getting sound from this video, but so you were interviewed by CNN, and they showed, this is the actual video footage, right? Of him right there standing.
That's correct. Yeah, it's actual video footage.
Yeah.
Like David said, it was shot in 16 millimeter movie film, and it's actually in color. We had it in color.
It's incredible to see this. I cannot imagine what your father was feeling at this time, just not knowing what was going to be happening. But so there's the video. Thank you so much for sharing this. Let me go back. So I'm going to go back here to, okay. So Mike and David, can I ask you how you felt when you saw this video for the first time? It's incredible.
Oh, it's tough. Very, very tough. I mean, but it's something we had known, but just to see our dad standing there was, it's really incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I imagine it was very emotional to see him, moving and standing there. So then what you found out also was that there was a scratching on a wall of a jail cell in Pyongyang in a courthouse, which said, Sam Logan, Captain U.S. Air Force, shot down 9 September. And then he put 27 September. So on September 27th, he scratched this on the jail cell he was being held at in Pyongyang. And in September 27th, our U.S. forces had not gone into North Korea yet. We had just made the Incheon landing. This was about 12 days after Incheon landing. So at this time in September 27, when your dad was in there, they were battling for Seoul. So the Marines and there was a lot of Marines there, actually, 1st Marine Division, and also Army fighting in Battle of Seoul to try to get Seoul back from the North Koreans. And they would not cross the 38th parallel into North Korea until, I believe, October. So it would be a while before his scratching was discovered. in
It was actually discovered by UN troops.
Do you
by
know
United
when?
Nations troops.
Do you know when that was? Okay, it says here, November 22nd, 24th Infantry Division located the graves of some of the crew that have been killed. I don't know if that's around the same time that the scratching of your dad's
It's
name.
about the same time. It was in November that
Okay.
they retook that area and found that.
So almost 3 months later, at the end of November, is when they found your dad's name there scratched. Now, when did you find out they had found this? When was that information given to your family?
No,
That
not
they-
immediately. My
Right.
grandmother found that out when she went to Washington
Uh-huh.
in 1956.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so at least she
She
knew
went,
that.
she
Okay.
went with some other Gold Star moms to
Okay.
Washington DC
Uh-huh.
to put pressure on them to find out what happened to their sons.
Mhm.
And that's when they had, first time they had access to those files. And that's the first time that they knew anything about that particular information about the scratching on the jail wall.
Wow.
And she,
So,
for 6 years, that was kept secret.
right. Well, your dad was super intelligent. Obviously, he knew that it was important to leave traces of where he was being taken. So at least we are grateful. I'm grateful to know that your grandmother and your mother knew of that he was at least there at that time. So
Well,
what have you
because-
found? Oh, go ahead.
Because of what you just said, Susan, as that's why we know that he was sent to Russia,
Mhm.
because he they were trained for these things to do if captured, and he was not seen or heard of in any of the POW camps. And there were thousands of soldiers that were captured in POW camps. And a captain of a B-29, people would have made notes that, hey, I saw Sam Logan, or I saw him in this camp or whatever. He was never seen in any of the camps. There's no record. So he was taken immediately and shipped to Russia.
Yes. And now your father's story is also featured in a book, correct? That Mark Sauter and John Zimmerly wrote, called American Trophies. I downloaded that and I read that a couple years ago on my iPad. Now, what has Mark and John been able to find out for you? Is there anything additional they found out for you that you didn't know before?
No, I've talked to him a couple of times, and I've even talked to Gordon Chang, and he said that Sam Logan should be the poster child for missing in action. And because so much was known, and yet why weren't the Chinese and the communists and the Russians pressed for information about a known live prisoner instead of just nothing? Didn't no interaction with them on, we know you've got Sam Logan. We want to know more about it and we want him back. None of that.
Right. So after all these years of research and that you both have done, what is your own theory of what might have happened to your father? Do you have any idea how long he might have lived, or what is your thoughts on that? Do you have any conclusion?
I personally don't think he lived very long, because I think they tortured him to an extent. I mean, he had no value other than his knowledge. And so when they got all they could or couldn't get it, they probably killed him. So I don't think he lived there. My mother and grandmother would have liked to have thought that he was, there for years and years in a prison camp, but they had no reason to keep prisoners for long term unless they were going to negotiate or trade those prisoners for other prisoners. But they wouldn't admit they had them. So by admitting they had them, that would, defeat their purpose. So they wouldn't admit that they even had them.
So in your opinion, you don't think that they kept him alive until the armistice was signed, and then there was a POW exchange? Little Switch was in April, and Big Switch was in August to, I think, October 53. So you don't think they kept him alive until that point?
No, I don't think he was alive at that point. And even if he was, they would admit they had him.
That's right. The Russians never wanted to show their involvement in the war.
Exactly.
So they were very good about hiding that. And that's why the MiGs never came down very far from MiG Alley. That was
Right.
one of their ploys. David, what is your theory? Do you have the same kind of opinion that you think your dad did not survive very long after he was captured by the Russians?
I have a hope that he didn't. I can't imagine anything worse than, I mean, the Russian prisons are historically horrible. And nobody, in Germany, one of the best ways that they threatened German soldiers to get them to talk was to tell them they were going to turn them over to the Russians, because everybody feared the way they got treated by Russians. It was horrible, and their prison camps were terrible. And so, I would hope that he didn't have to live a long time in that environment and with that horrible conditions, and probably in pretty, his dad lived to be in his 90s and his mother lived to be 98, and he was a very healthy man. So, under normal circumstances, he would have lived to his 90s. So he was very healthy when he's 30-year-old when he was shot down. But I just think the conditions were so horrible, and he'd probably been tortured, that my hope is that he did die and go on to heaven.
So what is it that both of you hope for regarding your father? What are the hopes you still hold on to? What do you hope for? Do you hope for new information? Do you hope for
that his story is told? That's the main thing, that that he gave his life for this country.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother and grandmother never gave up waiting for their warrior to return.
Right. Well, so we are telling his story and making known your father. And I'm so glad that you are sharing very personal and also very painful memories as you recall how this affected your mom and your grandmother, and also obviously your lives. So I'm so grateful that you're willing to share your father's story and make this hero known. And I really hope that many other families will continue to do that. I know that your father would have been over 100 years old, right?
101. He would have been 101.
101. Wow.
August.
And since he was so healthy, maybe he still would have been alive if he had survived the Korean War. So let's go on to an interesting journey you had, Mike. You had the privilege of flying on a similar B-29 that your father flew. So I'm going to share a screen here of, okay, what happened to my presentation now? Okay, here it is. Okay, and okay, can you all see that now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
August 6, 2011.
Okay.
At the time, 2011, Fifi was the only flying B-29 existing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's another one now, but nevertheless, Fifi is part of the Continental Air Force, and they fly Fifi and other historic aircraft around the country and put on basic air shows, and people can see these aircraft and actually fly them. There's the B-24, and there's several other aircraft, but the B-29 is by far the largest. And it came to the Millington Air Force Base in North Memphis, Tennessee. And so I had told my family that I wanted to go see it. I'd never seen a B-29 up close. And so I was telling my children and my mother and everybody that, I'm taking my Suburban, and I can take 8 passengers, and everybody that wants to go with me. And they basically acted like they were non-interested, but yeah, we'll go to make you happy.
Uh-huh.
And so the night before, we all went out to dinner, and little to my knowledge, they had bought me a ticket, not a ticket, but the ticket, the number one ticket. They sell about 12 or 15 tickets on these flights, but the two main tickets are the sit in the nose cone where the bombardier would sit, and the second seat would be to sit behind the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And so the tickets were very expensive. Even in 2011, the ticket was $800. And so I personally would have never bought that ticket for myself. It's just not me. But my children and David and my mother and my whole family pitched in. That's a picture of my daughter. She was the ringleader, and she actually got the ticket and called the Memphis Commercial Appeal, the newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
and they actually sent a photographer and a writer out to interview me and take pictures. And the next day in the Commercial Appeal, they had a full page spread on my flight on the Fifi.
Wow. So what a great family you have that they did this. And I am sure this was a experience of a lifetime that you can't put a price on. And even though it was $800, I'm sure it was worth every penny.
Oh, yeah. And Fifi came back this year. She came back to another airport in North Mississippi. And so I went to see her again. I didn't get a ticket, but I did look at the board, and the ticket to sit behind the pilot was $1,500.
Oh my gosh, inflation.
Yeah, inflation over 10 years.
My gosh, but how historic this was, and how smart of your family to have done this, and how wonderful. So then the next picture I want to share is of a veteran you met. Now, please tell me about Mr. Joe New that you met.
Yeah, Joe New was 90 years old, and he was an airplane mechanic. And the mechanics basically worked on the planes, but when they flew over the hump, the Himalayas, to go to places, the mechanics went with the plane. And so he lived in Jackson, Tennessee, which is just 90 miles from Memphis. And his son had brought him to see Fifi because he had been a B-29 mechanic and had worked on many planes. And so when I met him, he was just very, very astute and very talkative and knew everything. And he said Fifi was one of the planes, Little Mike was one of the planes that he had been assigned to for part of his tour. And he had flown on Little Mike many times and had worked on her many times.
Well, so this was divine intervention, wasn't it? Clearly, God's hand brought both of you together. He had flown on Little Mike, which was named after you, the bomber plane that your father flew, and you were the son of that pilot. And what an incredibly indescribable thing it must have been for the two of you to meet and figure out this connection.
Oh, it is. It was, and like I say, he was in his wheelchair, so he couldn't get in and climb around like I did. I got to climb in the plane and go all through it. But his knowledge and sitting there was so great that I actually went back to Jackson, Tennessee, and spent the afternoon with him one afternoon, and just thoroughly enjoyed his stories. And he went to tell me that he was on a B-29 when Japan surrendered to the United States, and MacArthur had put all the planes in the air as a show of force to fly over the Missouri. He said, I was in a B-29 looking out of the window when we flew over the Missouri, and he could see everybody on deck of the Missouri.
Right, and the Japanese signing the surrender.
Exactly.
Papers. Wow, what an incredible veteran he was. And I'm so grateful that he lived to meet you and tell you about him having flown on Little Mike. What an incredible connection that is. Incredible.
Yeah.
So the next picture is where I think we see you actually inside. There you are, right behind the pilot.
Being a photographer, I had my camera and my video camera, and it was probably over 100 degrees in the cockpit. And brought my own headphones, thank goodness, because you couldn't hear anything. But fortunately, one of the other ticket holders was able, I handed him my camera and he took that picture of me. That's actually as we're flying over Memphis.
Right. So you see the pilot in right behind you, right? That's the pilot.
Right.
And then the guy that's sitting in the, that's where your dad would have sat.
Right.
So this must have been very emotional to sit in this plane. What does it feel like for you to be there in that plane?
And the guy in the white T-shirt with the B-29 on it, he had bought the premier ticket, which was to sit in the nose cone there where the bombardier would have sat. And that was an $1,100 ticket.
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know. I kind of like where you chose that seat.
I did too.
Your dad, because that's so symbolic, right? Right to be closest to where your dad would have sat and flown the plane.
Exactly.
Wow, beautiful. So how long was your flight? How long did you get to fly in it?
It was about 30 minutes, and it took off in Millington, Tennessee. And then it circled around and flew directly over the Mississippi River at about 3,000 feet. So it flew right over. You could see the Memphis skyline on the left and West Memphis, Arkansas on the right. And we flew over. Memphis is known for the pyramid that they built right there on the river. It's now owned by Bass Pro, and it's a store and a hotel and a restaurant. But then it flew all the way down over the two bridges that cross the Mississippi from Arkansas to Tennessee. And then it circled around, turned around, and then flew north back over the two bridges with Memphis skyline on the right. And it was, even though that picture doesn't show it, it was a very clear day. Mm-hmm. And just a beautiful flight, but it lasted about 30 minutes.
Wow. It's a beautifully designed plane when you think about all the glass, that's over the nose and the roof. Visibility must have been pretty good as a pilot, I imagine, with all that glass in the front there.
Yeah.
Now, do you think your father ever flew this area with his B-29? Do you think that's possible?
I don't think so. He was basically Strategic Air Command out of Spokane, Washington, when he was flying B-29s.
I see. So he was flying on the northwest coast area, not in this area.
But he had gone through all the training and was classified as a weaponeer. So a B-29 weaponeer would have classified and qualified him to have flown the Enola Gay over Nagasaki and Japan. So he had that training, which also made him a valuable trophy.
Mm-hmm. I see. Wow, this must have been such an incredible experience of a lifetime for you. Now, I'm gonna see if we can get our screen back. Are you able to see this still? Are you seeing your?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing my picture. Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here. I think the operator is the problem here, just me. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry for all the technical problems you've had. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that the two of you want to share? I know we covered a lot of things, but I'm sure that there's other things I might have missed.
No, I just want to thank you, Susan, for following up and doing this. It's a wonderful thing that you're doing to honor our father and the men and women that sacrificed for the freedom of South Korea. And so even after 70 years, you're and other people like you that we know well, mutual friend in Huntsville, Alabama, that are continuing to honor these veterans and POWs and MIAs. It's really a great thing you're doing, and we appreciate that so much, because for so long, Korean War was the forgotten war. And so were the men and women that were sacrificed during that time. So for you to bring this back up after 70 years is really great, and we appreciate it so much. Well, thank you.
Well, all the thanks goes to heroes like your father and your family, and so many Gold Star families like yours. We can never thank you enough for what we have received and what was sacrificed for us. You sacrificed your father so that we could live, so that we could have freedom. And there's just no way we can ever thank you enough for that. But I'm so grateful and humbled to have come to know you. And I'm going to share a little bit about Casey Bertling now that we're talking about our good friend in Huntsville. So the way I got to connect with you and Mike is through Casey Bertling. Casey Bertling is a Korean American lady in Huntsville, Alabama, who holds annual luncheons for Korean War veterans. And I believe she saw either the CNN or the Fox News interview that Mike had done, and she sought to find you, right? Can you tell me what happened with Casey?
That's exactly right. I'm not sure which of the two interviews I did, one with Fox and one with CNN. And David, you did one with some news bureau.
I did one with Fox.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, she saw mine for whatever reason, and how in the world she tracked me down, I don't know. She called me and introduced herself and explained, what she does and so forth, and wanted to get to know us and meet us. And I said, absolutely. And so we were excited to make that connection and meet her husband Sam, and he's very interesting as well. And so we feel like they're family now.
Yes. And the way that, go ahead, David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say how special she is. As a kind of a surprise to Mike and I both, she and Sam wanted to come up and visit us on my dad's 100th birthday, what would have been his 100th birthday. So Mike was in town in Nashville, so she drove up from Huntsville, and she put together a cavalcade of veterans on motorcycles and a big fire engine, and they just had all the flags flying and everything, and pulled up in front of our house and came out and presented us with 100 personal birthday cards from people in Huntsville, expressing thanks to my dad for his service on his 100th birthday. And I mean, she just went way out of her way to make a special celebration for us, which, I don't think, Mike and I might have recognized that was his 100th birthday, but I don't think we were planning any celebrations. But boy, Casey and Sam really put on the dog, and we've got a bunch of pictures of that too. But it was really, my whole neighborhood wanted to know what in the world's going on with all the motorcycles and fire engines.
Well, that's why I love Casey, because she will go the extra mile, and absolutely, as Korean, she's Korean and so am I. We absolutely cannot do enough. We can never do enough. And so I'm so glad that she honored your father in that way on his 100th birthday. Yeah. And the way I got to both of you is I was talking to Casey some months ago, early this year, as I was planning the online event we had in Korea at Seidan Presbyterian Church. Now, I just found out through this interview, your father was Presbyterian. That's not by accident that this Presbyterian church honored your father. So I asked Casey, hey, Casey, is there any MIA families or KIA families that, I can add to honor during our tribute ceremony? And then she mentioned your father right away. And so that's when I talked to Mike. And so that's how we connected. So I really do believe one person can make a difference. And she certainly did in your life. And now I got to know you, and now our audience here will hear your dad's story. So I am so grateful that the two of you have kept your father's legacy alive, doing these interviews with the news outlets. I think a lot of families of all MIAs from all wars need to always do that. We can never forget them. And so I thank both of you from the bottom of my heart. And it is such a great honor to have spoken with you today. I appreciate your patience through all the technical difficulties I had. And I certainly hope to see you both at the dedication next year of the Wall of Remembrance.
I'm excited about that. I think that's a must do. I'd really like to follow up with that in July of next year to go to Washington and see the dedication of the memorial, the new memorial.
Yes, well, you will definitely be invited, you and David. And you are among the many families I have the honor of knowing that we would love to invite. This wall is for you. I know you don't have a grave. You don't have a gravestone for your father. So I know that this wall of remembrance will be the gravestone for so many families of missing who don't have a grave. So I know it will be sacred and so important to all the families. So I'm looking forward to seeing both of you in person next year, July 27th, for the dedication of the Wall of Remembrance. And again, I just want to thank the Korean War Veterans Memorial Foundation for the immense amount of work that they're doing right now to finish that. From what I understand, they will start etching the names fairly soon. I've also posted videos on my Facebook page that I get from the Korean War Veterans Memorial Foundation of the progress they're making on the construction. So if you go to my Facebook page, David and Mike, or I'll send you the link, it has a construction video of how it's progressed since early this year and what they've done so far in the area they're going to build the wall. So you can kind of see the progression. So they're going to give a monthly update as they put the wall in and get it ready for July. So that will be a very significant milestone for all of us and for all of America to finally know the names of heroes like Major Samuel Porter Logan Jr., who will be named on that wall. Well, God bless you both. Thank you for this incredible conversation and education for all of us today. And look forward to speaking with you again soon, Mike and David. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Bless
All of
you.
us.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.